We're going to get the meeting back together going here. It's 10 till 4. We're moving into the action section of the agenda. Before we do that, I realize we missed a comment out there from the public on the last information item. That last information item was the review of the Residential Energy Assistance Program and requirements for eligibility, page 64 of the agenda. And here's our comment today. Please introduce yourself.
John Hernandez, 514 J Street, Brawley.
And Johnny, you're also on the ECAC committee, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thanks, Johnny.
I just wanted to weigh in on this particular issue. I agree with Mr. Kuhn's assessment, and I think that it should be looked at. And I also heard a comment by the general manager saying that they had no problem with, taking whatever action the pleasure of the board was. But in talking to ratepayers and talking to seniors, those are my peers now. I get, mixed reactions. Some are for it, some are against it. There's positives, there's negatives. There's those seniors that know how to budget, they're on fixed incomes. But the majority of the ratepayers, they have fluctuating incomes. When you have to true up, I heard again that it's at different times of the year, so it affects people differently. So overall, I think it's a good program to average and try to make it easier for ratepayers. But it becomes a negative when it does not allow you to participate in the REAP program, in the emergency assistance program, and even now that we have the solar panels going up by Citizens Energy, it also, you're not qualified if you're not on the average billing program. So for those reasons, I think it's a negative public benefit for my peers, the seniors, to make average billing a requirement for some of these assistance programs. So I would weigh in on the side to make some adjustments there, waive it. And then the final comment would be that we take a close look at the income guidelines, because the income skyrocketed for certain parts of our community and remain stagnant for those on fixed incomes. Another thing that I think...
Saying there, Johnny, are you saying a cap on the income is if someone reaches
there's income guidelines that are set to qualify. Family of one, family of two, certain number of thousands of dollars per family of four. And you have those tables that are used by various different governmental agencies, that those tables vary. 80% of median income for your particular community and 135%. So it can be kind of confusing. I just would hope that, that they're looked at and that they're current, the income guidelines for the qualification for what's considered low income for our programs. And finally, I think I noticed on a utility tax, especially in Brawley, that the amount of the total bill is taxed for the utility charge on the ratepayer instead of the reduced amount, the 20% or the 30%. The utility taxes that the ratepayers that pay utility taxes on their IID bill, and I don't know how many, perhaps finance department would know how much money we're putting out or having to reimburse the city, or how many cities, or somebody would know how much. And so that's another activity that, we're involved with that affects us, our ratepayers. And I'm not here to say whether that's right or wrong, good or bad, but, you make your own decision if it's true that the city of Brawley is taxing the ratepayers on the full amount of the energy costs rather than on the reduced amount if they're paying the 20% or 30% less. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Mario probably knows the answer, but it might be a state thing, because if you get something on sale anywhere, they make you pay tax on the regular price, but even though you got it at a reduced rate, we'll let him talk.
if I may, you're correct, Director Kuhn. We have two cities in the Imperial Valley, Hopeville and Brawley, that have a utility tax. It's 5%, I believe, on all utilities, whether it's water, it's energy, telephone, and such. The rate are controlled by the cities. We have two cities up in the La Quinta area. The rate is based on consumption, and that's why, Mr. Hernandez, when you get the bill, it's based on on the consumption of your whole electricity. So your bill is $100, say. Then we come back and we deduct 30%. We really don't deduct. We transfer $30 from the low-income benefit program, and that goes back into the IID's rate. So the rate is made whole. But the taxes are set up by the city's entities, and it's on consumption because they don't want to. So whatever discount you have is still not going to matter on that tax. That's kind of a very short answer. Is it's based on your consumption, not on the final bill. Our guidelines have just been updated a couple of months ago, and they're based on the federal guidelines, the property guidelines. And they're based on 175% of the governmental property guidelines. So we take the governmental property guidelines based on the size of the family, and then we multiply that by 175, and that becomes your eligibility guidelines for our programs. And I believe those were the two questions that Mr. Hernandez, comments that he had come up with.
Thank you, Mario. Any other questions, board? Okay, this takes us into action items. Action item 10, page 70 of the agenda. This is the internal audit general matters.
Yes, good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. Just a couple of things. We're going to have two audit reports we're going to place on the next board meeting agenda. Also, we are working on the off-schedule audit request on the QSA legal expenditures, and we hope to finish that in about the next 30 days and bring it to the board. Other than that, I don't have anything unless you have any questions or requests from me.
Any questions for Betty?
Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Action item 11, page 71 of the agenda. This is a continued sponsorship of the Coachella Valley Economic Partnership for 2013.
Yes, President Desert, members of the board, Patrick Swarthout is not in attendance today. I believe that he does endorse the idea of upping the annual contribution to CVEP, but we would recommend that you maintain the status quo at $50,000.
Any questions or comments from the board? Motion to fund at $50,000.
I just had a quick comment. I met with Mr. Flavin, who's here, and I don't know if you have any comments. You were up in the Coachella when we met there. I think they do have a good program. I'd like to see it introduced here in the Valley if possible, or look at some sort of partnership, if we will. But I'd like to understand what the relationship is with IVEDC, which is kind of a sister company here in the Imperial Valley, and how that relates to the Coachella Valley as well.
Well, Mr. President and members of the board, my name is Tom Flavin. I'm CEO of the Coachella Valley Economic Partnership. And again, as I said last week, I want to thank you for your long-term support. As you recall, the IID has been involved since 2004. It originally came in at the $100,000 level, then sometime down the road prior to my arrival, decision was made, well, I was going to invest half of that into the economic development portion, which is working with companies to help create jobs in the IID service area, and the other 50 into the workforce development program, which CVEP probably has one of the best in the country. But that that never happened. The second part of that didn't happen, and nobody seems to know why. So in talking with Patrick, who's very involved with the workforce development program, he recommended that we see if we could make the case for it this time. And in talking with Director Benson, I know that there's some real interest in the community about the workforce, instituting a workforce program here. And I offered at that time, and still leave the offer open, that we would be happy to help you, to provide some technical assistance to do it, because we're being asked by other parts of the state and really other parts of the country about our program, and there's no reason in the world we shouldn't be helping you here. But like everything else in economic development and everywhere else, it seems that being able to provide those services also, demands resources. So my job is constantly trying to raise resources to do the things that need to be done.
Well, God, I mean, everything costs money. Everything seems to gradually cost more money. We have a large number of meters over there. They don't get to vote. I don't know that I'd be willing to.
What do you mean they don't get to vote?
Their water district.
Well, not for us.
Well, sure, they vote for their representative.
Yeah.
Anyway.
One comment I would make, and I don't mean to interrupt you, Bruce, but I'd like to know where Edison is, because they also represent a large part of your service area.
They're at the $100,000 level. They also support our economic summit and other programs that we're involved in. So I would estimate their total investment in $140,000 to $150,000 range
And then
annually.
Coachella Valley Water District and some of the other water districts involved.
Well, that was one of the first questions I asked when I arrived 2 years ago. Why aren't the special districts involved? So I approached the Coachella Water District and the Mission Springs Water District, made a pitch to the board, but didn't make any headway my first time around. But I'm a pretty persistent guy, so I'll be back again.
Mr. Flavin,
Yes.
we share in the net proceeds with Coachella Valley Water District. So when we talk about our fair portion, because we do have customers there, and we know that they're not contributing to this, but yet they're participating in our revenue flow. Since I've been on the board, one time, if I'm not mistaken, we wrote a check for $24 million to them.
It was a settlement.
And we've got additional funds that we're settling up on, so
8% of
whenever they say that we don't contribute, we contribute.
Well, and
People say they don't have representation. We have a contract with Coachella Valley Water District on the energy side. Mm-hmm. And those people represent them because they have this agreement with us. Okay? Now, I don't know what other programs. I know I looked at your program, and it's very impressive. I will admit that. It's very impressive. I'd like to see it here. But I know that we also have contribute to the enterprise zones here, 2 enterprise zones plus IVDC. At some point in time, we have to pull this together to get the bang for the buck.
We're actually well represented in the Coachella Valley, and I don't mean to infer that CVEP is not a worthy organization or cause. It is, but we've not yet passed a budget, and we're facing a sort of retrenchment in our own good works going forward. So I think the most prudent thing is to stay the course as is, and work up to something grander.
I would be supportive of keeping it at the 50,000 level.
Mr. Flavin, we've got the totals: Edison 140,000, Coachella Water nothing, Mission Springs 0. And what was the IID's total though in up in the area last year?
IID's total investment for the year?
Right.
$50,000.
Well, I would, I guess I would share the sentiment of Mr. Hanks, but, I'd make a challenge to Coachella Valley Water District to use some of the funds that we share back with them, because we do, Edison is a for-profit company and we are a not-for-profit company, and we do have an arrangement with Coachella Valley Water District to share in the revenues that we generate in that area, and I would like to see some of those revenues contributed to your organization, similar to other organizations in the area. I mean, they are one of 4 water districts in the area, and I think we've shown a lot of goodwill to that area in the sense that the QSA benefits Coachella Valley Water District, and we also have a lot of issues on the Salton Sea that we're trying to address. So,
Well, and I think that's an excellent suggestion, Director Benson, and I'd welcome any encouragement from IID.
Here's some encouragement, okay? I don't know that I'm going to get a second, but I'm going to make a motion that we continue at 50,000 commensurate upon Coachella Valley Water District meeting it, dollar for dollar. Then you'd get your increase.
Well,
I think you ought to ask him for a couple million. I'm just kidding.
well, from my perspective, and the $50,000 investment is generous. I mean, we produced these results that I shared with you last week based on that investment. If there is a sentiment on the board to continue at that level, as recommended by staff, I would certainly be agreeable to that. I'm not sure I want it to be contingent on another $50,000 coming in from the Coachella Valley Water District, but I'm willing to go make the ask. But if I had a little support behind me, I might be more effective.
Well, you're going to have your support, because I've got a motion here that says if they don't, then we may have to revisit this.
There's no motion to approve it, so which one goes first?
you have 2 motions, actually. Then you make a motion.
What's that?
I thought I was being tough.
Yeah, 1 motion.
Not tough. That's, they are benefiting greatly from their big check of, what'd you say, 27 million?
I think you should go back to Coachella Valley Water District and say, we said shame on you for not supporting it.
This will. If I get a second, we pass this thing.
Make it 50, regardless of whether they.
What?
Well, you going to send him in there with no teeth?
Well, I
think I can help on this. What we'll do is suggest to the
Coachella Valley Water District to
general manager there.
Participate.
I think that they're in a search right now, but I do know the interim, and I'll explain to him that it's the clear intention of this board that CVAP enjoy the support of the Coachella Valley Water District.
Is that a letter from the general manager or a letter from the board?
Whichever you desire.
Let's make it from the board.
Yeah, I'd support a letter from the board.
You get to draft it. Okay, so we have a motion for that. Do we have a second on Mr. Coons' first motion? We don't, so it dies for lack of support. Sorry, Bruce.
I'm so hurt.
Make a motion that we send them a letter seeking their support as we share with them our revenues from electrical generation in that area, and we support economic development, so should they.
And that letter also is then done in conjunction with a $50,000 support for this.
Well, we already have 50,000, so I would say, we're looking at our options going forward, but if they're not even involved, why should we increase our obligation or anything?
So you're limited at 50,000, right?
Well, we already gave 50,000, right?
well, 50,000 is what you allocated
budgeted,
for 12-13. We're talking about 13-14 now.
Well, we got time for the next year's budget.
I'll second that motion.
Okay.
So just so I'm clear, Can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Don't worry, we're going to send Mr. Kuhn to explain it.
If I'm understanding,
After I get out of finishing school.
the IID board would be allocating $50,000 to CVEP with a letter going to the Coachella Valley Water District to encourage them to
do
contribute another $50,000 to make
this-
the $100,000.
To do the same, yes.
Yes.
Do the same.
Yes.
Okay, that's fair enough from my perspective.
And we only charge 10% commission for doing that.
Recognizing that this is the subject of litigation between Coachella and IID. Get the help you need.
You know, I don't want to get in the middle.
And I would just ask that you coordinate with the IVDC and share any, knowledge transfer down here, all your
Okay.
great ideas that
All
you
right.
can do.
In fact, if you'd like, we can set up an opportunity to bring some of our workforce team down here and just kind of share with some of the educators and business community about how it works.
Well, I think the chambers, I talked to a few chamber members and they're interested in going up there and looking at your incubator and
Right.
Rabobank being involved, how they can do the same thing down here. So
Great.
there's a lot of interest.
Okay, we have a motion from Director Benson. Is there a second? A second from Director Hanks. Call for the vote. Okay, motion passes 4-0.
Thank you very much.
Share with Pat that I thought it was really chicken of him not to be here.
Yeah, I don't know where he is. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, moving on to action item 12. This is approval of amendment number 6 to service agreement number 81-0935 with PSK Solutions, Inc. Hello, Carlos.
Good afternoon, President Desert and board members. I'm here again to have you consider approving the PSK contract for 2013 in support of the WIS system. I think I spoke about the WIS system last time briefly as being a 1995 program developed for the Metropolitan Water Conservation Verification Program. And the last 16, 17 years has grown to include 8 or 9 other water department functions over and above that small verification and data management program that it was originally intended. Just a brief short list of these functions include the support of the Safe Drinking Water Act, Western Farmland Lease Management, filing program contracts management, on-farm contracts management under the Efficiency Conservation Program, QSA data accounting, main canal scheduling on a daily basis, and at the end of the year, the IID water balance. Also, we've taken advantage of the system periodically to include ad hoc reports like support of the 218 water rate program, taking into account all the information we gathered through that process. Currently, the IT and water department staff have gotten together. We've identified 3 priority programs, the fallowing program, on-farm contract support, and the main canal scheduling, where we have staff that has met together. They are concurrently working on documenting, and between the water department operations staff and the IT technical staff at this level, the business area analysts working to document this to the proper level in each of their respective areas. We will work to support the program through the end of this year, make sure that we're able to support it internally fully from the operational area as well as the technical side. What we see, though, is that if the fallowing programs or conservation programs for the on-farm support grow, we may need some technical assistance at the end of the year or possibly next year from Ms. Kaziasko. But as the system stands, we feel we can get moving on and fully support it with the functions as they're defined right now in the WIS system. Anyway, I hope you support going forward with this so we can move on with her contract.
Carlos, I thank you. And I think you're doing a good job for the district. And I'm going to have to tell you, like I tell Jesse on a routine basis, don't take this personal because it's not intended to be personal. I don't mean to be crass, but I'm going to make this memorable. I mean, this thing's like a booger. You just go like that, and it's still there. I've been trying to get rid of this thing for 12 years, and it's just always, no matter how many times you bring it back. No, I've been told, I don't mean you, no matter how many times, I think this was before you. How long you been here?
Almost 30 years.
Well, you were here. Anyway, I've even got where Stella was laughing at this thing. She said, "It won't go away. It won't go away." And I was assured about 12 years ago that we would train someone of our own to do this. And I'm telling you, it's still here. I don't get it. And it keeps growing. This woman has made enough to retire like a whole bunch of times, and she's still here. I understand her system works. Mm-hmm. Kurt Dimmitt, he assured me that Met would pay half of this, and now we're paying 180, and they're paying like 44. That's not half. Mm-hmm. So this thing somehow gradually became our baby again, and it's still here. And I don't want to be oversimplistic, but this is like a soap opera. I was gone for 8 years. All I did was turn it on. Same thing's going on around here. And this was supposed to have been taken care of. We should have trained someone in-house to do this, but it's still here. Again, wasn't trying to be crass, but I just want people to remember this is a long time being here as houses. I think of this, the reason for getting rid of this is almost the same reason as why I supported changing Mr. Osias. It's just been here too long. Fresh eyes, something. I'm not going to say I won't vote to do this, but I sure don't want to.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
I have a question or a comment. It seems that this is amendment number 6, and it just keeps progressing, as Director Kuhn says. Is there no one else in the computer savvy world that we live in today that can analyze a database and do this sort of work? Because as far as I know, when I was in college long time ago, that's what a lot of people were studying to do. And can't we find someone internal to the district to do this? And has it been tried?
Well, we depend a lot on water-based knowledge in the different areas. Now, with the different programs coming on, like the fouling program and the
that's pretty simple
on-farm
stuff,
programs,
though.
we have operations staff that can take care of that. In the back end, I know that Tony has committed staff to make sure that we do this. It's kind of strange to bring it up, and the previous management last year, in mid-year, they had planned on coming forward where they plan to outsource the work.
Okay.
Minute, and then come back in and train staff internally. But that was going to be a lot of money over and above the PSK contract that we had at that time. There wasn't any capital money for us, so that kind of killed a lot of time. But I know that we're committed to do it in-house now versus adding additional outside staff or contracting consultants, because we do feel that we have in-house staff in the water department that knows their particular area in depth. We need to document it for people who come on later on in detail. Same thing with IT. And I believe that Tony does have that commitment made to identify his own staff, both analysts and programmers, to be able to support it fully. I mean, Tony can attest to that if he wants to.
Yeah, actually, I had
personally.
a question for Tony, if there's any money in his budget to take this on, or is this something that stays in the water department?
What we're doing right now is we're just I've dedicated internal staff to take care of this. What Carlos is trying to say is that when we talk about internalizing this, there is definitely an IT component. Mm-hmm. And Director Benson, like you were identifying, we technical staff, we can train database, programmers and personnel. That's not a problem. The bulk of the knowledge transfer is from Penny to the water department. It's to the subject matter experts in the water department.
Right, but it's supposed to have happened 6 times already. This is change order number 6. So when does it stop happening, the knowledge transfer, and just close the door?
Carlos?
So this is the third year of a 3-year transition
Okay.
of not only the principal's involvement, but the transfer of knowledge. And this came up yesterday in a discussion that we had with staff, including Mr. Allegranza and the water department. So my question was, can we assure the board that in this, the third year, will actually be done? And the reality is, according to Tony, that we cannot assure you of that. There may be some holdover into next year. And so the only thing that I would say to the board is that that 3-year transition clearly wasn't working. And I think that Mr. Allegranza should be given the opportunity to give us a transition plan that does work. If not in 2013, then at some point in 2014.
Okay, board, comments, questions?
Do we have an individual pick that's going to be the heir apparent of this on staff? Or are we just... Well,
Different functions and fully independent programs into themselves. For instance, the Safe Drinking Water Act, we have an individual who, her and another individual take care of that program as on a daily basis, along with the following contracts. Same thing with the on-farm conservation program. That's going to be a real extensive program if you start contracting out field by field, hundreds of fields. So we have individual areas in the water department that has to have area specialists. Now, these function through a database and specialized programs that are programmed into the WIS, into the Oracle and the database itself. Those then have to be integrated, working with operations staff and IT to create the algorithms and the database structures that are technically set up in the system. So it's not a one individual who would handle this, because we don't want to rest everything on one individual. It will be a group of staff working in an environment, kind of like SAP. You have different modules. You have a group of people who manage that. The WIS has grown to a point where it is a multifunction system, and you need a group of staff that works together in water operations and IT to make sure that the system works.
Yeah, I don't know where this board's at with this approval. I would suggest that we table it, and I don't mind taking a look at it further to try to figure out if we can't get it resolved in a year. But like, it has gone on for a long time. I'm new to the board. I have a little bit of a background in computers, but I have a lot of friends who have a lot better background. It just seems that the more complicated you make a system, the more reliant you are on it. And it'd be nice to simplify some of this stuff. And I don't know if we're just trying to create too much of a black box or not. But.
So Director Benson, you're interested in a motion to table it and bring it back with a more thorough, thought-out plan of how we're going to approach this and transition it, that both this board and the agency and the water department and IT department can be held accountable to.
Well, I'd like to see what happened in the first 2 years of a knowledge transfer, because if we're not getting the services out of a consultant, then why do we continue with a consultant that...
I don't know if the knowledge transfer was put in the hands of the consultant, PSK Solutions. I think it was put into the hands of the IT manager, that old IT manager that was in charge there. And it isn't comforting, Carlos, to hear the comparison to SAP, because there's a lot of questions about SAP and confusion. Mm-hmm. So I'm not interested in growing something or creating something even near SAP, because there's not company-wide buy-in or participation. There's blowback. There's static about it. There's expensive updates that we have to do, and it's more confusion. So, any other board members' comments here, Director Hanks?
Well, haven't heard a second, so I'll go ahead and jump in there. I would like to maybe have Director Benson to look into this and give us some advice on this. This has been ongoing since I've been on the board, and every time I look at a 3-year transition, I keep thinking that transition is a new board transition in and the old and out, and it's going to keep going.
I like 6-month transitions myself.
Yeah, I would like to see whether, take a look at it and see what our needs are. The amount of money we're paying, it'd be nice to have that person here, living here, doing this, for the, I don't even know how many days that is a week,
I've yet to see her in the 3 years that we've been. I know that she exists, and I know that she is very good at what she does, but there is an over-reliance historically at IID on individuals. And I believe that it would be a healthy thing for Director Benson to work directly with the team that is responsible for making this transition good, and to come back to your board. Because I am concerned that the water department, with all the demands on it in 2013, doesn't need to scramble in that regard as well.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to make this clear, people, that if she was trying to pick up all her money and it caused her to have a heart attack and she died, we'd have to replace her. I mean, we're not going to shut down. So it's not something that can't happen, and it's just been promised for a long time. And Director Hanks has actually hit it pretty close. The board changes, so this thing just keeps coming back and keeps coming back. And I don't have anything against her. I do know her from way back before she had this thing. I knew her husband and her before they got their divorce and all that. I mean, yeah, but it's been a long time. But, there's an old saying that cemeteries are full of people we just couldn't get along without. But somehow we keep going forward. And so this is like a bad dream. I don't dislike her. I think her work is excellent, but it's time for us to take charge of this. And Carlos, please don't take anything I said personal, because it's not intended to, and I'm not capping on you personal. It's just this thing. and this was here before you were in the position you were, so you inherited. I understand that. Okay.
Betty, do you have a comment?
Yes, Mr. President, if I may. Just one thing, it's most certainly it's up to you, to the board, to make the decision. I just want to remind those who were not here 12 years ago, as Director Kuhn was, and those of us who were here, I would like to just give you a little history of this whole thing. While we're talking about PSK Solutions not making the transition and the knowledge transfer all these years, even Mr. Silva was here, and then he was absent for a while and he came back again. It wasn't the promise made to this board and previous boards for the last 12, 15 years. It wasn't by PSK Solution that she's going to make the transition and that IT is going to take over. It was your previous IT managers who promised the board something that, while I feel a little bit better about saying that, I am still going to be frank and give you my observations on all these years. I don't think they knew what they were talking about. So when you got, regardless when you got the promise from the IT managers, and as those are the only managers standing here making the promise that since starting back in year 2000, we're gonna take WIS over. WIS needs to be moved back to IT. Nobody addressed the fact that it's not the database, it's not the technical, it's not the programming, it's not knowing Oracle, it's the knowledge that requires on the water side. And that's where, fortunate for Penny, is she grew up at IID from a very young age, and she understands the water side of the business. She understands what it needed when we ask spill data, when we ask conservation data, when we ask for all these reports that the water department relies on, even now doing the QSA, and obviously even heavier because of what we are facing with. So while I know that the new interim IT manager has dedicated people to do the technical transfer of this water information system happened this year, water department needs to make or find the talent within the existing staff to take over that side of the whole water information system. Then, if they can do it this year, that I don't know. But I just want to make sure that we all understand that all these years, and Director Kuhn's frustration, very understandable, comes from the promise made by previous IT managers that I don't think they fully see what is all involved.
Well, those previous IT managers didn't see what was fully involved here, and those previous IT managers at the same time grew that IT department up to a very large level. And this board has been buying programs. These boards have been buying servers and equipment, and we just keep expanding and expanding staff. And then the feedback we get, and Mr. Alexander, this is not aimed at you at all, because you're new up there, and I have all the faith in the world in you, Tony, to address these things. But the problem is there's a lot of complaints and blowback about IT and not being functioning with the department needs on energy, water, and even HR are not being responsive, taking a long time to get back and do things. So I don't know if these departments are fully reliant on IT to do these programs or queries for them or design things, or what the message is. But we need to get a message back to not just the managers, but to the IT staff also, and to the water department staff, that, hey, we've got to get this thing together and get a solution going. We're doing things here at the IID now with this new board, with staff changes, with attorney changes, with negotiatings to get settlements out of the QSA. This is a different board. And this has got to stop. So Director Benson has made a motion to table this and bring it back, and I've added to it, bring it back to us again with a plan, a detailed plan of how we're going to get there. And if you want us to vote and support it.
I would just add to that I'd like to see specific staff outlined in the plan on who's going to take it over, and to hold those people accountable and responsible for getting it done, because I've heard too many times at the IID and other institutions, well, it's not really my job. Well, it is going to be the person's job who's assigned to this task, and hopefully they'll come through. That's
and
those staff members at IT and Water need to understand this one is a priority. We need to make an example out of this one, and then we'll focus on the next one that gets to rise to this level. So I'll second Director Benson's motion.
And I am not advocating to change your motion. What I'm saying is I wanted to bring forward the history and to everybody to understand, and don't punish somebody who's been in job for a very short period of time for things that haven't been done, promised but haven't been done in 12 years.
It's okay. Tony had a full head of hair a week ago. So
that's a point well taken. This is an organizational failing, and we have the right people in place
to fix it.
And Betty,
and that's
if Tony,
that's exactly my point.
If Betty,
been here long enough, I know.
If
yes, sir.
Tony doesn't have a teddy bear, I'll get him one.
Now, I just really wanted the board to understand, for those that knew the history, why it happened, what it happened.
Now, for those of you who don't know, I have teddy bears that say, Kuhn Division 2, sleep tight, you're protected. I'm not going to let anybody get on him.
Okay, so we've
Thank
got a
you.
motion and a second to table it and bring it back to us with a little bit further, with further detail plan. You've heard Director Benson talk about identifying specific staff members. So do we need, let's call for the vote on that. Okay, so this table to come back to us at another date. I recommend you listen to what we said today and also take up Director Benson on his participation and his expertise in this area. Thank you.
Director, can I make
Sure, Tony, please.
I'm feeling an overwhelming sense of support and confidence, and I appreciate that. In the same light that this is a new board, I'm going to make it a new IT. People will be held accountable. We have people dedicated on this right now, and we have more than just a work group going. We're actually accomplishing things. We have been reverse engineering part of the database, which nothing was being hidden from us. It's just a tool to help us, and so we're making good progress. It's a partnership between Water Department and IT, and the plan is to make it a success, and we will get that detailed plan back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Allegranza. Okay, action item 13, acknowledge receipt of energy cost adjustment report for January 2013, 73 of your agenda, and this is Sandra Ainsworth.
Good afternoon, Director Desert and board members. Got the update for January 2013 ECA, and I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead in the presentation to the actual calculation. And for the month of January, the preliminary actual figures the calculation resulted in an ECA rate of 292, and that resulted in a preliminary overcollection of $688,000. Now we've got the final January figures in since this was submitted to the board, and that was reduced to $300,000. So the actual overcollection was $300,000, so pretty close to being even for the month of January. So I'll give the recap to you with the carry forward balance from 2011 and the amount of overcollection that was utilized in 2012. When added to the month of January, that brings us to a cumulative overcollection at the end of January of $36.8 million.
Thank you, Sandra. Questions, discussion from the board?
Yeah, Sandra, for the year, the cumulative year total of ECA that was brought forward from the .0099 provision of the base rate, how much money did we move forward to pay for ECA?
Can you ask me that? Can you
Yeah, let me
ask me that
help
again,
you.
please?
Okay, the ECA portion in the base rate
Yes.
generated what, 33 million?
For a full year, yes.
Okay, and how much of that 33 million was used to cover ECA expense? %50%, right?
Well, 50% we set aside into the balancing authority. So in concept, the other 50% would have been utilized to offset ECA applicable energy costs.
So roughly 17 million.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I just want to make that clear because we're going to use that number in a little bit.
That's correct. I wasn't following you. Thank you.
Okay.
So does the $15 million or half of the .09 or the .99, does that still get set aside going forward for balancing authority out of the ECA?
As of now, every month, we are setting aside 50% of that 0099. But with the proposal that Mr. Broking will be bringing forth to you shortly,
Right.
We are proposing that effective April 1st, that would stop. And not only would that stop, but the resolution
the
also
base rate
says
would
that we
cover.
would, yes, the base rate well, that those funds then would revert back to the base rate.
Okay.
The balance of
Yes.
those funds would revert back?
To the,
And just technically speaking, for the average person out there, there was some confusion when we were in La Quinta last meeting. Someone from the audience came forward and was saying that the ECA looks like it's been used for different things over time. Traditionally, the ECA is not just an IID vehicle; it's used by other utilities. Correct?
that is correct. It's a standard across the industry, both municipals and investor-owned utilities.
Okay, and I always think of it as a fuel surcharge to cover the cost of fuel if it goes up or down, and then it can move over time.
Right. We don't like the word surcharge, but it is a way to pass those costs through to the customers without having to implement base rate increases. So in theory, yes, what you're saying is correct.
Okay, now is there any fuel charges in the base rate itself, or is the base rate just for transmission and capacity? And
There
other-
are power supply costs. So included in the base rate, if you just take away the 009 credit and exclude that, capacity charges, premiums for natural gas and energy purchases, and the falling water charges are all power supply costs that are excluded from the ECA and therefore included in the base rate.
Okay. Now, as we get into these long-term PPA agreements that escalate over time, can we shift those over to the base rate to lower the ECA, or is your recommendation to keep it in the ECA?
Finance's recommendation is to keep it in the ECA, and the reason for that is we do different things. So we may have some power supply agreements that it may make sense for us to go out and to sell some of that power, and then if we're over purchased on the power, to go ahead and sell that into the market. And then when we were actually seeing pretty low market prices for energy, we were going out and taking advantage of that as well on the market prices. So it makes sense. I know I'm an employee, but from also a customer perspective, it seems more straightforward to me to think and to be able to see that my power supply costs are all rolled up into, or at least partially rolled up into, that ECA charge. But I understand the ECA more than the average customer.
Okay, and then just looking at your budget versus actuals, and this just could be because of the markets, but it seems that there was a big shift away from purchasing power, and instead we bought a lot of natural gas.
That was, in fact, a function of the market. So natural gas has remained so low that it was more beneficial for us, instead of purchasing power, to fire up our own internal units.
Okay.
So that's why you see that natural gas is above budget, while power supply is below budget.
Okay. And then what is demand reduction when there's a budget item for that? We have a 0 there.
Demand reduction are for programs that Sabrina Barber's group would go out, and what we looked at a few years ago is that in some instances, it's less costly for us to actually go out and purchase demand from our customers than to go out and purchase energy on the market. So we may have some programs, for example, where we don't currently, but we're looking how to do this in the future, like curtailment programs and things as such, where if energy market is spiking, prices are spiking, that we would actually call on a large industrial customer and say, we'd like for you to curtail, and we'll pay you X number of dollars to lower and bring your demand down.
Okay.
So we don't have to go out and purchase that expensive energy on peak.
So that brings up another question, because it's been brought to my attention that IID currently does not have a time of use rate, and this would follow along with a peaking, non-peaking load. I know India Water, they pump groundwater, and they've asked that if they can look into a time of use rate. Brawley Beef has looked into the same thing, because they can run at night and shut down during the day and actually have a lot lower load during the day. I realize that it would be a shift in our power use as a district, but if we can keep businesses here and make it cheaper for them to operate, I think that we should work along with them, especially when we have a $500,000 a month in demand reduction that we're not using. It would essentially go towards a peak, non-peak rate structure. So I would just ask the board if we could look into that and kind of tie it back into this ECA going forward.
you know, that demand side, time of use should go kind of hand in hand.
The speaker.
Do you have any comment, Carl?
I think we need to look at time of use. I think there are a lot of things that I would like to get the Energy Department involved in looking at on this side of it, because there can be more efficiencies gained by depending on the type of weights and type of incentives that we offer on there. So I think we need to have those discussions to a greater extent.
Well, I just think it'd be beneficial, especially as we get into more pumping and farmers looking at having pump back systems, things we can run during different times of the day. I mean, I know if I could have electric motors instead of diesel generators out there, that I would run them at night, not during the day, because it'd be cheaper if it was available to me. But currently it's not available. So.
Point taken. And I would just like to remind, I think Director Hanks was on the board at the time. In the past, we had actually brought forth time of use rates, and they weren't received very well, but it may in fact be time to revisit them. So I did want to let you know it's not something that we haven't looked at in the past.
Okay.
But point taken.
Yeah. I think it would help businesses in the area and be a good faith effort to work with them going forward.
Okay, so any other questions regarding this presentation, board? Looking for a motion to accept the...
I'll make a motion to accept the ECA update for
January 2013.
2013.
We have a motion from Director Benson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Director Hanks. Further questions, discussion? Call for the vote. Item passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this takes us to our last item of the action agenda today. This is item 14, adoption of resolution regarding changes to the energy cost adjustment rate and the use of rate stabilization funds to become effective April 1st, 2013. Page 79 of your agenda, and presenting today is Mr. Greg Broking.
Yes, I have a presentation, and at the end of the presentation, we'll seek board approval for the proposed changes that I'm about to discuss, and to use the not only the over-collection this year, but before we use any of the rate stabilization money, to get board approval for that action. So our proposed adjustments for 2013, the first one's not really an adjustment, it's to maintain no rate impact to our customers for 2013. So the current ECA rate is 3.24 cents, and we're proposing to keep that at 3.24 cents. We want to fully utilize the ECA balance. I know that $36 million number is a little different than what Sandra just presented. It keeps changing every month as we go through, but $37 million we plan to fully utilize during the year to keep 324, to keep that rate at 324. We'll utilize $23 million of rate stabilization funds to also help keep the rate at 3.24. And then, as I mentioned earlier, that we won't use any rate stabilization fund monies until board approves it. And then the last thing that we're proposing is to eliminate the component cost of energy, which is the once the ECA is calculated, and I have a slide or two that goes through that, we reduce it by 0.99 cents. We're proposing to get rid of that credit. I've personally have never quite understood why it was there, and the way our business has evolved over the years, that I don't believe it should be there. So comparison between 2012 actuals and 2013 budget. Go down to the bottom. If you can see the ECA applicable cost in 2012, they're $145 million. They've gone up, projected to be $175 million in 2013. Jumping back up towards the top of the slide, purchase power has dropped considerably, about $30 million. Renewables have gone up. Natural gas has gone up, mainly because El Centro 3 will be in for a full year. And those are the main drivers of that $30 million increase from actual to proposed budget. And then the base rate, fuel and purchase power costs, they go up a little, about $4 million, not quite $4 million. Most of that is what we pay for debt service on our SCAPA projects, and also includes the falling water charge and any options or premiums that we may have. How we envision this to work during the year, we have 2 slides. We split 2013 out 6-month periods. If you go to the over-under collection line, which is 3rd from the bottom, we're projecting, this is before we got actuals for February, but we were projecting over collections in the first early part of the year, and they're very small over collections. And then you see in April, mainly when some of the renewables kick in and our load kicks in, the under collection is much greater. So for the first 6 months of the year, we're not planning on having to projecting to use any of the rate stabilization money. We will be, lack of a better term, eating into the over collection of the ECA that we currently have on hand. So going to the next 6 months, looking at the same line, you can see the overcollection. There's no overcollection in the last 6 months. We project an undercollection for each of the months from July through December, and then we will use the overcollection of monies that we project to still have that we need to return to the customer. That will overcollection will go away by August, and then in August we would have to use rate stabilization monies to keep the rate at the 324. So beginning in August, right now, through the end of the year, we would use rate stabilization money with board approval. And so if you combine the last 2 lines, you're using about $59 million of overcollection of rate stabilization money to maintain the rate at 324 for all of 2013. And then we have $100 million in the rate stabilization fund now, and so you subtract the $23 million, there would be $77 million available beginning in 2014 that the board would take action on for the 2014 budget to see how they would like to use those monies. And so the formula that was approved back in 2002, we have the projected energy cost. Those are the ECA energy costs, plus or minus the balancing account, less any wholesale energy sales, which are pretty minimal from year to year. Most of the wholesale energy sales run 2.5 to 3 million a year probably. And then when we have any excess gas and we sell that, that also is used to reduce the projected cost. And then we divide that by kilowatt hours to come up with a rate, and divide that or reduce that by the component cost of energy, or the 0.99 cents, or almost 1 cent. And so we've kind of already talked about the individual formula and what were the individual components. And then what we're proposing to do, as I stated earlier, is to not give the credit, not subsidize the base rate, basically. Let the two try to stand on their own. And this is what our forecast would look like in 2013 with these changes. We had good debt service coverage. Anything above 2 is, I think, considered good to excellent. Our unrestricted cash balance would be moving up. We're around in the $90 million range right now. It would go up about $132 million. We need to get that probably even higher than that, probably close to 150 or 200 million, mainly because on the energy side, I think there's about $45 million in the OPEB account right now, and that's a very large share of our unrestricted cash. Power supply cost total for the year forecast $253 million. The EC applicable power supply costs $175 million. The rate, as we said, would stay at 3.24 cents. and the amount of rate stabilization funds that we would expect to use during the year is almost $23 million. And so that's the end of my presentation. What we plan to do if we get action today on this issue, that we could bring the budget back next week, because our budget is predicated upon
Thank you, Mr. Broking. There's been a lot of discussion in regards to the ECA, and we've had workshops about straightening out the formula on the 0.099 cents. And that seems to be a wise thing to do. It corrects our revenues on our energy side for the base rate revenues, what we can do with those. And it also speeds up the redistribution of our ECA over collection revenues. The question though arises is we're going through this resolution today. I think you're going to get feedback there, and I do want to make sure that we get through this today as best we can, so we can get action taken. There's some concern about, once we burn up the overcollection revenues, about then getting into that area of the rate stabilization account and not having feedback from the board or input as to taking a look at where we're at that time. Not only where we're at, but perhaps taking a look at our ECA rate and what the markets are doing to see that it's a smooth transition as we move forward in the future. With that being said, from my perspective and comments, I'd like to ask the other directors if they have anything to add or input here. Any questions for Greg?
I got some questions.
Director Hanks?
In the interest of getting this through today, I'd like to take out a red pencil and get after it. Okay?
Okay.
All right. The reason I asked Sandra the question, how much of the base rate that was set aside for the ECA did we use for coverage of the ECA, and how much was used for the balancing authority? It's going to take me just a little bit, so hang with me, okay? The ECA that's been subsidized by the base rate for a number of years has been the equivalent of 33 million. And thankfully, through the reduced rate of natural gas, our ECA has been reduced to the point of a overcollection. But at the same time, our expenditures in the base rate have been suffering. We have some capital projects that are affecting our regulatory issues that need to be fixed. And so I want to go there first. On the capital cost, capital, and correct me if I'm wrong, and Carl's not here, so I guess he can't. Oh, there he is. On capital costs, these are long-term investments. You know, we're talking about, for example, building out Path 42. The life of those projects should be approximately 30 years. Okay, so you know, to me, I think we need to be real careful how we establish revenue for those capital projects. I think it should be spread out over a period of time, and the time of use needs to pay for that capital. It's not fair to come in and ask the ratepayers, current ratepayers, to just, okay, we want you to pay for the next 30 years of service on this upgrade. So that requires a financing plan. And I know Greg is very familiar with the bonds. We have some capital, some commercial paper that we need to roll into a bond, and we need some funds for capital projects. If we try to pay for those as we go, a 30-year service as you go, we're going to be right back into this situation again in a couple of years and saying, okay, we're going to have to increase the rates. So what I'm proposing is that the cost shift that we're doing, the ECA, to go, that we're going to cover in with the over collection, that the money that we have been subsidizing ECA with, that be dedicated to debt service on capital projects. We set aside $17 million last year for some of the balancing authority issues where we know that we have a soft spot and we need to take care of it or lose our balancing authority. That money is available. I think for the first year, that money should be used on as debt service on a bond to go forward. Take care of your commercial paper. Take care of your bonding. That, I think we designate that for PAF 42. Take care of PAF 42 within your bond, but use the $17 million for your debt service on that. Whether it's a year or 2 years or whatever, that's fine. But we have a number of upgrades that we're going to need. So by doing this cost shift, we should be able to handle more of our upgrades by going for a capital bond. To qualify for capital bond, we need to show to our lenders that we have the will to take care of that service, and that this adjustment will do that. I think the amount projected for the ECA is overstated. And reviewing through this, I think this coming year we will use up the overcollected, the $36 million. It may go just a hair over that, and I say that for this reason. We didn't use the full $34 million last year for ECA. We set aside half of it, okay? But we're going to use the full $33 million to replace it this year. We had another instance last year with Unit 3 where we used an additional $6 million. So the $17 million and the $6 million is $23 million. And so the money that's projected in the reserve account, I think is hyperinflated. But I'm not willing to gamble all that. I'm saying we're going to leave it there. It's available to us, but I'm not willing to commit in a resolution that it's out there.
That it follows necessarily.
Yeah. I would encourage the staff to keep on progressing. I know since I've been on the board, they've tightened up in a lot of areas, and we haven't increased the rates, and we're kind of hitting the wall now, but only because they have cleaned up a lot. I'm anxious to see the numbers that Mr. Stills brings me back on the energy that's been generated and purchased and so forth. I still think that's one area we can still find some efficiencies. But if we reach a point where we need to pull out of the out of the rate stabilization fund. It's there. The board can take action. It's not going to leave you holding. But I think with us moving to our own training system, there was a big savings there with our contract that we have with Coral Energy. There's still some room for improvement there. Personally, I'm going to track it this year. We have moved some SOC personnel into the trading, and we have to take care of some, move some back to SOC or whatever. But your SOC people by nature are reliability people. So whenever they're trading, what's in their mind is reliability. They're thinking about the generator and so forth. And I would like to see a day-to-day when the transaction comes on board. If we pass up a transaction that would have proven to return some revenue to us, I would like some justification for it. And there's a firewall between the traders and the reliability people. One is economic base, one is more reliability. And there's a separation wall to kind of protect that, so that you do get the most efficient organization that way. On the PAF 42, we have 17 million set aside, and you could just go use that. But I think it gets right back. It runs your cash down pretty tight. I think you'd be better off if you set that aside and use that for debt service and held on to it. At least get you through a couple of years till you get your bond passed. You might have to use commercial paper until you get that passed, but I know you know how to handle that. But in doing this, I believe the projections are that we'll use up the overcollection, that 36 million, that'll be pretty much gone. The next year, so we start making a transition, that we limit the amount taken out of the rate stabilization fund to cover the 33 million. And then you start letting your ECA float. And it'll start adjusting itself and start ratcheting up. But it will take about 3 years to burn up your rate stabilization fund, and by that time you have made your transition. Instead of having to make it all in 1 year, just all of a sudden the rate stabilization gone, you will have made a transition to cover this amount. In the meantime, we have some other issues that we have to be thinking about. We have the San Juan. We have the outage issue. And I think if we're not careful, we burn our cash revenues down, we could get in a pickle. So I would like to see us use that increase to look at capital. And it may be that you have to shift some out of your regular budget into that capital, some that you've already budgeted for. But I think it gives you a little more time to get your budget lined up and get your cash flow where it needs to be. So my recommendation is this. On paragraph 4, knock off the last sentence. Yeah, we know there's you have a projection there, and it could require us to go to that amount. On section 3, under the therefore, The part that reads, restricted funds in the Balancing Authority Reserve Fund will be moved into the Unrestricted Energy Department working capital account. I'd like to see it moved into the capital, but I'd like it used for debt service on the capital. That we consider going out so that we do the necessary upgrades that protects our balancing authority. That would include PAV 42 and some of the issues that cause our outage. That would also I would also ask that we remove the last sentence of Section 3. What we're asking the public to do eventually, it may take 3 years before it hits us full bore, but we're looking at an 8% increase in the base rate. That's what this equates to. We can cover most of it for 3 years before you see the full impact of the 8%. The first year you shouldn't see any impact. The next 2-3 years, you should just see the fluctuation that naturally has occurred in the ECA, and most of that due to renewables.
So
and hopefully we don't see a big increase in the natural gas during that time.
And shifting the capital requirements in this way, does that entail going out into the bond market in 2013?
Yes, it will.
Do you have any?
Well, we have plans of borrowing, I think, $75 million this year and $75 million in a couple years out. So to borrow $150 million over the next few years. So that's not a problem. We can use that money for either new or existing debt service. Obviously, if it's we pay $40 million a year right now in debt service, so it would pay a little less than half of the debt service for this coming year. That's $17 million we set aside. But if I could talk about Director Hank's suggestion that we eliminate the discussion of the rate stabilization account. If you look up at that slide and say ECA revenue is calculated total for the year, it's 4 lines down, it's $166 million. And what we're going to get if we keep the rate at 324 is $107 million. So how we're making up that shortfall is from the overcollection and the rate stabilization. So there's really no way I can keep that rate constant without using the rate stabilization money.
And that may be, but I'm gonna put it out there. I brought this up 2 or 3 years ago, and I was told with my thinking I was going to burn up the rate stabilization fund, and what happened, it increased by $50 million instead of being burned up, and I before we move that out of the rate stabilization,
Come back to the board.
that money is to help us offset these renewable rates. That money goes back to the public, and it will be going back to the public as promised. And this first year, we're telling the public your overall rate is not going to increase, and it may require to stay within that, Greg. You may be right, and we may have to pull out of that rate stabilization fund. But I'm not willing to just put it out there right now.
So you don't want to concede it right now?
Yeah, I don't want to concede it now, and I think Mr. Hernandez pointed that out when he came up the time before. He may not have gone quite there. I think he was seeing the same thing that I was seeing, that may not be necessary.
So by not conceding it right now, what we're also saying is that before we go in and start using that rate stabilization account, that it involves activity and engagement with the board to decide.
I think that's the way we budgeted it, I don't think you're really conceding anything right now because we have to bring it to the board for approval. The only thing I can say that if you want it out of the budget, then we're going to have to redo the budget on the revenue side and recalculate our numbers, because it's one thing to budget for items that you're going to put in front of the board to vote on. It's another thing to put that revenue in there where the board says they don't want it in for the year. So nothing would prevent you from adding it during the year. I just can't budget for it. So it'd be a budget variance if we don't put it in.
Well, Greg, I've budgeted for a lot of years. And the reason that we've had an overcollection is not just the lower rates, but that our projections were conservative. You want to make sure that we covered it. And it was there. And that's all I'm saying here. I think you're being over conservative here. And I don't want to push that out there, especially if we're going to take the balancing authority money and that's going to be used for capital, which has a lifetime use of 30 years, and spend it out there the first year on the ratepayers that are responsible for 1 year use of it.
So
that's my recommendation.
I'm trying to understand something, but you're saying that you want to take the last $23 million or whatever the number is. So you take the 36 out of the overcollection, but then leave the 100 intact?
Yeah, it stays intact, but it's there if you need it.
Okay, so the 59 less 36 is 23, right?
Yes.
So you're where do you go get that 23 million from?
Well, last year you had 17 million that you put in the balancing authority.
Right, but that's a new year, so
and you got 6 million.
Assuming he's not 50% over on his budget, which I would be pretty mad at him if he was.
No, the 17 million we set aside, but it was revenue. We collected the revenue, and we just designated the revenue for the balancing authority reserve.
So you're saying 23 less 17 is, you're only talking about 6 million?
Well, I'm still...
I'm trying to find 23.
No, I'm talking about 23. I understand what Director Hanks says about what happened with El Centro Unit 3.
Right, but that's...
And as always, these are projections. So obviously, if we came in less than the $166 million number, we would need to use less rate stabilization money. Would we be able to come in $23 million below that number? I mean, I guess anything's possible, but we didn't budget it that way. Energy Department budgeted their best guess is $167 million.
What is the biggest cost in our budget is always
it's power supply.
The power supply,
Yes.
Natural gas. What are we budgeting natural gas at, and where is it today? Because that's probably the biggest difference out there that we can pick.
Yeah. So we have 62 million budgeted. And I don't know exactly. I know they used a forward curve. It's probably, and I'm just guessing, around 450 is probably what they're using.
All right.
And the natural gas is a little less than that. But it's volatile, so it's gone up recently, but it could go back down. I mean, that's...
What the federal government said, it's not going to go over $4 for the next 20 years or something. And they're always right.
I mean, we need to be, conservative on our forecasts. We just try not to be overly conservative.
So Greg, in order to move this forward, making these type of amendment or changes to the resolution in the fourth paragraph, taking that sentence out, that's going to require you to adjust your budget.
It will require me to adjust my revenue budget and recalculate.
Can you, if we do this, can you get that done in time for your budget presentation at our next board meeting?
I won't have a budget book for you, but I think I can get you the numbers by then.
How does the shift of the $15 million a year into debt service work, do you just pull money that you're using for debt service and go fill the hole over here to the 23, or do you actually go? Is it new capital expenditures that you're talking about?
The 17 million, as I understand Director Hanks, is it can be used, I guess, for either existing or new debt, and over time it will be spent.
I think he means for it to. He's designating it for a new bond.
You want
for
new,
capital,
right? Jim?
Pardon?
You want new bonds, not
Designate
existing
that
bonds?
half of the penny to a new bond.
Yeah.
That's still not a problem. We can use that money
What
for
we're
new debt service.
proposing, based on this resolution, we're talking about over a period of time, when the rate stabilization fund goes away, it will have equated to an 8% increase on the base rate. On the ECA, what we're proposing, if we burn that is roughly 16% on the increase on the ECA.
Are you saying when the ECA adjusts as calculated, or?
So when all the funds are gone.
If you use the 23 million out of the rate stabilization, that's what it's going to equate to.
So you're saying it should be 0.0501 instead of the 324? That's the annual total.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the cumulative over the
right, but
whole
if
year.
you go for it.
This also could bring it to the board's attention and alert us, enable us to take a look at our rate structure when we break that threshold and burn up the overcollection account and start going into our rate stabilization account.
I had a quick question, and it was for Carl, but it was related to long-term planning and kind of business planning of the energy side. You had made a mention in the past meeting that you were looking to put together a long-term plan and
Yes.
incorporating San Juan and some of these other changes, big
Yes.
picture. What's your timeline on doing that?
We're thinking we'll have the draft IRP somewhere in mid-April for viewing and discussion.
Okay. But it's not going to affect the budget in the next 6 months, really. It's a longer-term proposal.
It'll be more definitive as we start identifying and narrowing down this capital plan of what we think we actually have to do. But that's still subject to discussion with the board and how we move that forward.
So Greg, if we take this last sentence out of the resolution and then out of paragraph 4, the fourth whereas, and the last sentence out of the bottom part of section 3
Yes.
on the second page, is that something we can do and get everything accomplished that we need to get accomplished with the upcoming budget presentation?
As I said, I think we can run those numbers. We just won't have a new budget book. I don't think we'll have time to make all these changes and get a new budget book in time for next week. But I can certainly have them for a presentation to show the impact.
Okay. And then, but we can utilize the old budget book to talk about some of those water items that I
On the
mentioned
expense
earlier.
side, of course, yes. This
Right.
doesn't affect water at all.
So the water,
Yeah.
so that budget book will be a tool that we can utilize.
Yes.
And so that addresses the two sentences on the end of paragraph 4, the fourth whereas on page 82, and the bottom sentence on section 3 of page 83. Now let's get into the language. The sentence above that, Director Hanks, it says restricted funds in the Balancing Authority Reserve Fund will be moved into the unrestricted Energy Department working capital account and will be available for use for any lawful purposes such as payment of base rate, power supply costs, debt service, operations, and maintenance costs, capital projects, etc. What kind of language correction were you looking at again, Director Hanks?
I was going to use it for capital, debt service on capital on the bond.
So what change would you like to make to that sentence?
remove all of this other language, work for, be moved into the unrestricted. I would say instead of unrestricted, I would say remove it into a restricted capital account for debt service. Period.
So
The way it's worded, you can use that for any expenditure in the energy department you want.
So we changed the language from unrestricted energy department working capital account to a restricted capital account. And can we leave the rest of it then? And will be available for use for any lawful purposes such as payment of base rate powers?
I think he wants it for debt service of a future bond for capital projects.
So it's just debt service only. So you follow Director Hanks
do.
and what we're talking
Yes.
about there?
Yes.
Is that something we can live with, Greg, on this resolution?
Yes.
Okay, so we have the resolution amended as we've discussed. Is there a motion from the board to accept this?
So moved.
And do we have a second on this as amended, with the resolution amendment for this item 14, the adoption of the resolution regarding changes to the energy cost adjustment rate?
I'll second.
We have a motion from Director Kuhn to pass the resolution as amended today, as we've discussed, and a second from Director Hanks. Any further discussion?
I just want to make it understood. Regardless, there is no rate increase, overall rate increase for the ratepayer for this year.
What?
And next year, if there is a rate increase, it will be due to the fluctuation of the ECA.
I'm still trying to figure out how we're going to use that $100 million then.
Well, you're going to use $33 million to cover that penny again.
In 2014.
Yeah, it's automatic. Comes out of it.
So it's going to be a 4-year or a 3-year fund instead of a 4-year.
It's basically a 3-year funding, and the only increase during that time will be the fluctuation of the ECA due to market conditions.
What you've described is 3.24 guaranteed by these actions
For this year.
for
this year.
2013.
Yeah.
You'd like to see it free range in 2014. Under that scenario, the rate stabilization fund optimally would last for 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to understand. It feels like you just gave it a $23 million haircut to the budget.
No, I didn't give it a 23. I just
You don't think it's going to hit that?
what I did was the well, let me put it this way. Maybe this help explain this. If we underestimated fuel costs, purchase power, ECA costs in your budget, it will correct itself. It will.
If you overestimate.
You don't have to go back and say, I got to budget this. You have to cover the ECA, and normally it would ratchet up or down. If it ratchets up, then it's going to pull back from the stabilized count. So that's the part. I know he has to adjust some figures, but I think the only ones he has to adjust is the ECA figures.
Where you think it's been overly conservative.
Yeah, I think so, and I don't fault him on that. I'd rather be over conservative than under, but the money's still there. We're not spending that money. The money's still there, but we're just not conceding that cost there.
Greg, where you would plan to recoup that revenue between now and next week?
Plan on recouping it out of reserves. Out of our unrestricted cash.
With the passage of this, he has to adjust that budget.
What does that do to your debt service ratio?
I don't know. That's what I'll
See,
have
one
to-
one of the things you have to keep
Well, I
in
guess-
mind, he's lost 25% of the, almost 25% of the year because we haven't passed this budget. And that's going to have even a greater impact on the pool of the funds that's in the overcollection. Unless you make it retro back.
Well, you've already collected a quarter of the balancing authority funds.
Well, he's
And-
he's figuring on 9 months. It's
yeah,
April
but
1.
but we've kept the rate at 324, so it doesn't really impact it. As long as the rate stays at 324, we'll just we weren't planning on using much of the over collection the first 3 months of the year anyway. It doesn't really kick in until it starts warming up.
You've got, you've got 17 million in the balancing of account. The balancing authority account. And then you're gonna have this additional money coming in.
Well, I only have one last comment, and we've had 2 rate hearings on this, and Jim, if you have ideas like this, I would like to hear them ahead of time, because I'm a little slower than you.
Well,
I need time to absorb
all I can
it.
tell you, they've been out
But,
there. Before you was on this board, they were out there.
Okay.
I've had them out there, and as I've said before, there's consequences with board change elections.
That's
You know,
fine, but
before
no,
I
I mean, as
didn't
far
have the
as
support.
far as my understanding going into this was there was a intent to draw down those funds as fast as possible. It extends it another year, which is fine. But it's more of an issue of now rates are going to ratchet up a little quicker but slower. So there won't be a big spike. It'll be stair stepping along the way, and people just need to be aware of that.
Ideally.
Let me tell you, Steve, didn't change anything.
Oh.
I just changed the language.
Okay.
The money's still there.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion from Director Kuhn and a second from Director Hanks to adopt the resolution as we have amended today. Any other discussion or questions?
I'd like to ask Carl. Carl, in the Energy Department, does this hamstring you in any way, this action?
I don't know until I see the overall effect of it, but I am going to need money for capital because we know we have to do transmission. I'll just have to look at it, and I think I can live with it, whatever you do this year. It's just, my target is to make the adjustments and target next year is to get it the way it really needs to be.
And it's my understanding you and Mario both have immediate needs for capital, is that correct?
Yeah.
And it will exceed what's available currently in the budget. You're going to need some type of long-term financing
We're going
to
to
get
need
there.
we're going to need some capital. I'm a little concerned with our regional coordination efforts and travel and stuff, but I can adjust it as we go. So there's some major issues coming down, and we have to have people involved, and it's just going to take money to do that. But I can make those adjustments on the fly.
Let me ask Greg. Greg, on a bond for capital, how long would you think that would take to secure something like that?
2 or 3 months probably. I just need to look at the numbers that we're going to be showing the rating agencies. But under normal circumstances, 2 or 3 months, I'd say we could get a bond out.
Okay.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Call for the vote. Okay, resolution passes as amended today, 4-0. That's the end of our meeting. That's the last item on the agenda for action. So this IID board meeting is adjourned at 5:35. We are now going to move into a proposed rate feedback service rate hearing We'll take a 10-minute break. We'll re-adjourn at 5:45 for the...
Okay, just really briefly, we have been working with the developers and figuring out a backfeed rate and perform a contract to get the developers the ability to generate the backfeed online and IID supplying the station service. There seemed to be a little bit of confusion. I wanted to show you a diagram of the way this would look. If you looked, does this thing work? Hold on. If you look, we need to get a, do you have another one?
Battery.
There you go. Here's your gen-tie line that's up here. Now, generally for the backfeed, this would be not IID's line right here. This is line that right now is attached to the Cal ISO. And this is transformed down. It's actually metered here, and the generators would have their own meters, but IID would also have a meter. We would be measuring both directions. It's a bidirectional meter. And it would come down through this transformer, through the breaker. This would be your inverters down here for solars. It's your, and this is really the load right here for the backfeed issue. What they call either parasitic load or the would be the controls and the load necessary to generate the electricity to get it on the line. If you get down into your station service stuff down here, that would be like your housing, lighting, your air conditioners, things of that nature, okay? Now, right now, they would have to build out their distribution into this area and feed into the station service, and again, we would have a meter. And then if something happened to our lines or our supply, it would also transfer over and it would still be metered down through here and we would still measure that. Now, they generally back it up with an auxiliary generator or backup generator in case something happens for station service, or it could come right off the line. But there's a distinction. It's a demarcation point is right here. This is parasitic load, and when it's off the line, not parasitic load, it's really a backfeed from the line down to the load down here that would be distribution and be distribution served in IID's distribution territory. The backfeed tariff is a payment to IID that would really be a lost opportunity cost for us supplying that load. And so it's a markup for the generators on a backfeed issue. But again, we are not supplying this load. This is more of a lost opportunity. So it's just a markup onto that load. We are supplying this load down here. Okay. Now, normally, if we were supplying the whole thing, then it would have to come off of our circuits here and we'd transform at 34.5 and bring it down. But the generators would not be able to generate their own parasitic load if we did that, because you can't split the load and still sequence it up and feed it back from the line. So there's an issue there in the way the control circuits are. So again, I just wanted to show you, this is the distinguishing mark between here's your controls necessary to generate the electricity. This is just station support to support the station there. Okay? And with that, I'll let Greg take it off.
I got a question, Carl.
Sure.
Carl, what we're talking about here, it impacts, it's something we're going to have to address for the Pattern Wind Farm,
Right.
the Tanaska South or Sea Solar South project,
Yes.
AES,
Yes.
in the same area.
First Solar.
First Sentinella or First Solar, is that?
Campo Verde.
Well, what's this LS? What's it called now?
Centinela.
Sentinella and Campo Verde.
Yes.
And Silverleaf, if Silverleaf is built.
And Silverleaf and Wisteria.
And Wisteria, if Wisteria
Yeah.
is built. And SolarGen, when it's built.
Well, SolarGen is on our system, And it's not an issue because this line supply, IID is actually supplying this power. Now,
Do you always bring it in both ends?
yeah, we will allow the generators to hook up and we'll transform it down and take it right off the line if it's on our system.
All right, and those project, and okay, and let's go, the solar gen. So, and what about the property on the Allegretti Ranch? What's that called?
Well, I know which one you're thinking about, but that's right off of our line, so that'll be on our line.
That's the same as solar gen.
Yeah.
And then are there any other projects we're talking about?
Well, 8-minute energies projects,
And what about the Soul Orchard? Same thing as
Soul Orchard, same thing on
And
our
then,
system.
Soul Orchard's the
Peak
same
on our
thing.
system.
Sun Peak is the same, and Ormat's the same if it gets built out.
Right.
Because they connect into our
all
system.
the Cal Energies, Hudson Ranch, everything comes right off the line and is allowed to feed right down off the line, but we're scheduling that energy. And then the
Cal
market.
Energy, the geothermal. This is a
we
solution
do
to
this-
geothermal models
we do the
also.
Same thing. They're on our A2 rate, and they take it right off of our transmission lines.
What is our A2 rate?
Do you have it?
And then the rate. What's the rate being called that we're proposing with the backfeed? What do we call it?
The A2 rate is 265 a kW
2.65.
For the demand, and then the energy charge of 628 plus the ECA.
I couldn't hear you, Greg.
There's a 265 per kW for demand, and then there's this 628 cents per kWh plus the ECA of 324.
324.
So 952.
3.24.
3.24 cents.
And that's the A2 rate.
That's
And what's the
A2.
rate going to be called that if this goes through that we're talking about for these other projects with this backfeed for the pattern and the AES and Centinela?
It'll be a rate, but it won't be a tariff. We plan on having it through contracts that will have to come for the board for approval. But
So we don't have a category of that it falls under, a rate?
No, what we're proposing is 6.7 cents per kWh, and escalate that on a yearly basis. And I think we'll also have to add the public benefit surcharge to that.
So we'll have to add the public benefit onto the 6.7?
I believe, we're still researching that, but I think that's going to be the case.
Okay, so there's two rates involved, but the one for this pattern and these other solar projects that are we're talking about, we're not generating any power to sell to them.
No, that's correct.
I know.
That's correct. They will be required to, they'll take it off the ISO's line. They'll pay the ISO, plus they'll have to pay a scheduling coordinator for that portion of it, and then they'll pay the markup for IID.
And the reason being is by law, they're in our balancing authority, and they can't consume,
Correct.
they can't generate and do distribution.
By law, they can't serve distribution in our distribution territory unless we work out some type of deal like this.
And in backdoor way, this is kind of also the reason why we're not getting any credit for our parasitic loss on the geothermals, because they would be getting, they're not getting credit also.
The parasitic load on geothermals, they're self-generating that parasitic load, and they're what you call a high capacity factor. They're probably around 90% to 95% capacity factor. So us selling distribution in this backfeed arena to them would be a lot less because they'll be self-generating for most of the time. We would be selling the station service to them under the...
So up until a time that we have a distribution line to them where we could sell them our A2 power, this is the solution?
Well, we will get a distribution line out to these generators for the station service no matter what happens. That's a requirement. It's the backfeed power because you don't want to split the load. If we required them to split their load, they couldn't generate their parasitic load. If we allow this, if we tried to transition, then it would interrupt the sequencing circuits and you'd have a hard time getting the generator on the line. It creates a a real problem from an engineering standpoint to sequence from a split load to
If and
to
when
a
that day
non-split
comes
load.
and we get our distribution lines out to them, will they then take our power at our A2 rate, or will they continue to self-generate their
They'll
backfeed?
take our power here under the A2 rate. This will still be self-generated.
I'm not good on those
And-
schematics, Carl.
Okay. Well, the backfeed portion would be still coming off the line side, and then the station service would come off the distribution side.
Carl, what's the amount of power that the backfeed results in? I've heard a megawatt.
It depends on the on project by project, but it can be, Peter, half a meg to 2 meg, something like that, depending on the size.
That's during the time that they're not operating, so that's all night.
Right. During the day, they'll be generating. When they come off the line, it's a bidirectional meter. It'll actually meter the line coming down, and there will be a revenue stream for IID on that.
So fast forward that, if you have 12 hours of a megawatt, how much money is that in a year if you take a standard, 1 megawatt of backfeed?
Well, 8720 times 1 megawatt times 67.
What's the math?
What did that add up to? What did that add
Well-
up to the A2
What
rate?
times 1,000? A
Oh, no,
megawatt's
it's-
1,000
It
kilowatt.
would be 24 times 365. What's that? 8720.
What about this? You don't add this into it?
But it's 12 though, 12 hours.
Yeah, times a megawatt.
12
If-
times 365? It's 4380. 12,
12
because
what?
half the day.
Well, actually, they're probably closer to 3/4.
Oh, okay.
They're about a 25% capacity factor. So it's probably it's
So that's
8 times
6570
that. Yeah, times 67.
divided by 100? Or, just times 67, that's $440,000.
That would be what they would be paying probably close to an annual basis, depending if they had a 1 megawatt load.
Okay. But they'd be paying it whether they're in our system or out of our system, right?
Well, if they're in our system, that would probably be the delta. I mean, what we did with this load is just look at a comparable figure for us not generating that energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's similar to being on our system.
Let's go back. I want to go back to that A2 rate altogether. The 265 portion of the A2 rate, can you give that to me again? What is that? The 3.24 is the ECA.
That's the demand component for having transmission and generation available.
And the 6.28 is the base rate.
The 6.28 was the energy portion of that.
So, but to get to the total A2 rate, you have to add all three components together?
You have to add the ECA in there also.
So it's 2.65, 6.28, and 3.24.
Yeah, but you can't add them together because the first number I gave you is a demand charge. So
That's just an upfront charge.
So you have to multiply that by the capacity.
Right.
And then versus the backfeed rate of 6.7, which is just a flat rate.
Just a flat rate.
No demand charge.
No demand charge.
But we may have to add public benefits to it.
If we have to add public benefits, we'll add that to it.
Which is about 0.5%, right?
Yeah, it's not much.
And what validates this is by law. You said there's a case that in the past on La Quinta you shared there was.
Actually, the ISO just lost a case from one of its own members. I think SCE sued ISO about delivering distribution power inside their distribution territory. They won the lawsuit. It was appealed. The DC Circuit Court of Appeal in November, December of last year found that it cannot serve that distribution load. FERC has no authorization to authorize that.
And we don't know if public benefits was in charge though in that rate.
I don't know the components.
So then we go back when we get the distribution lines built out. Do they connect and then go on to our A2 rate under this model, or what does the future hold?
Yeah, they will be required to build out the distribution to have this supplied. If you remember, in my comments, I talked about the ones down south having to have that substation out there that was going to have to be built to get this distribution power down there. That's just going to be part of the process to get distribution power out there, a station service portion of it.
So this is a short-term solution until we get the distribution lines built out to them, and then they plug into us and pay us our A2 rate?
Well, it's a short-term solution for the station service, but once this design is in place, and if this design is coming off the line, this is a long-term solution for the backfeed.
Long-term solution for the backfeed.
You'd have a major capital rework here to rework the supply here to supply this on the system.
This is a long-term solution for the backfeed.
For the backfeed, yes.
Why would we do the distribution line?
Because of this portion here, which is the station service portion.
That's a much smaller load, right?
It's a much smaller load.
But a bigger upfront cost.
Well, it's more capital. You have to build the lines out to it.
So when we build out the distribution line and connect to the facilities, the long-term solution will stand for the backfeed, but the portion as distribution will have to be, for
That's
station
correct.
load, will be paid under the A2 rate.
That'll be paid under the A2 rate.
And there'll be enough meters out there to cover all this, the separation
Yeah,
and
you can
distinction?
see where there's probably, depending on the final configuration, 2 to 3 meters to be able to calculate those loads.
Has this caught the solar projects off guard? Did they always know this was coming, or did they?
We've been talking to them about this for a long time.
You talked to them about this at the stakeholders
We
meeting.
talked to them about it at the stakeholders meeting.
They
We've
weren't
been-
happy about it.
Well, we've been negotiating with Pattern Energy for some time on this issue. Pattern Energy actually didn't want to build out our distribution, and we waited till the last minute, and they refused to negotiate with us, and the ISO called us up and said, "You are going to support this, aren't you?" And we said, "No. They have to build out this distribution line to us." And so they put together a quick interim agreement. They paid us the $700,000 to build out the distribution line. We're still working on their requirements for environmental. But those things have to move forward. They're going to have to stay online. They have to comply with building our system out. Anybody doing a manufacturing plant putting in our system would have to do the capital investment to get our distribution out there.
Right.
So
Does
it's
Pattern
the same
have
thing we
a?
ask our customers
Sorry,
to do.
Carl.
Huh?
Does Pattern have a big backfeed draw?
Pattern has a big load. The problem with Pattern on the backfeed is going to be that those generators will rotate with as little as 2 miles per hour of wind. So they'll probably, for the most part, always have something generating a parasitic load. And it'll be a few days that they're actually off the line and actually taking the back feed. So we were absolutely positive they were going to have to take the station service from us. Plus, the substation, we're not going to allow San Diego to supply the station service in our territory.
So not just a Pattern will we not allow San Diego to supply the station service.
Absolutely.
On the solar projects also, we're not going to have them build step-down transformer to deliver their own station service.
Absolutely.
And by law that we can do that.
Absolutely. Most of them are on board with this circuit. They don't like this idea of building distribution out, but again, if we had another business that was putting something out there, they would have to come up with a capital cost to build the distribution out.
Does this make this area more inviting for someone else to bring in industry or something because there's a new substation out there, or no?
Well, I would think that the substation would definitely beef up the voltage in that area, yes.
Yeah.
And we will probably set something up that the ones that are moving forward pay for it, and then if other ones come on, they get reimbursed some of that cost. So all we're interested in is getting that substation.
And what's the cost of the substation?
Just depends. Right now, just the substation is probably going to, and the line coming out is probably going to be in the $11 to $12 million range.
That's a 230?
No, it's going to be a 92 kV initially, running the PW line out for about 7 miles and back.
And if we did a 230, it'd be twice the amount? You don't need
230 would be a lot more expensive.
That's transmission.
92's transmission.
230 would run us somewhere between $1 and $2 million a mile just to run the line out there.
Okay.
Okay?
Carl, what is the, what would be the total cost of the generator then out of their pocket to pay for back feed? That includes what, to pay an IID and what they're paying Cal ISO?
I'd have to get Cal ISO's rate. But their scheduling coordinator is, they're going to have to pay for that, and it depends on who they're negotiating their scheduling coordinator rate. So I don't have that information because that's company by company. And the Cal ISO rate is probably, let's see, we're probably at 12. They're probably somewhere in the 14 or 15 cent range.
So they pay 15 cents and then pay us an additional 6?
Yes.
Why wouldn't they just take it off our distribution?
Well, I think once this is all worked out, it's just an economic decision. I think Peter will probably tell you they'll be looking at where it's most economically advantageous to locate.
Because how much do they give up in Wheeling on the reverse side?
$3.94 per megawatt hour.
And that's on the produced cost for only 8 hours a day. but they're being charged on the backside.
Yeah.
But I guess it's 100 megawatts versus 1 megawatt, so it's a big difference.
No, that's correct. It's a much larger load versus a much smaller load.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
What's the risk of serving load in the IID distribution area?
Yes, sir.
What is the risk of serving load in the IID distribution area from outside sources?
What is the risk of serving load in the IID distribution area? Curtailment. If they were to serve the load and go forward without our approval, we would be filing at FERC to have that come off. And the other issue is the Cal ISO needs to be very careful here because they're an RTO. They don't want to be categorized as a utility. It kills their RTO status. And that's a major problem for them. That's why the Cal ISO is backing up on some of this.
Get back to what Director Desert was talking about with the projects that are hooked into the IID. What is the delta of what they're paying us and what we're receiving?
What is the delta between what they're paying us and what we're receiving? Mario actually helped work with our rates people to work this delta out. I think when you look at this $67 versus our rates, I think our cost of generation is extracted out of that, and what you're seeing is a comparable price. But I'll let Mario talk about that.
That's exactly correct, Director Hanks. What we did is we ran a number of scenarios on our A2 rate based on what we thought and this was for pattern, what we thought would be their usage. And then so we took kind of a middle road, and it ended up being about $118 a megawatt hour. And so because we were kind of pressed for time, we took all of the components of the A2 rate, and we took out the component, the ECA rate, which is basically just the energy, the cost of producing the energy. And so that's the only component that we took out. We chart, if you were to take kind of the ECA, the A2 rate, remember if you remember, there was 3 rates: the demand, kind of the distribution, and then ECA. And ECA is the one that. So we basically took that and said, okay, well, since we're not going to be supplying them energy and there's no costs for that energy, we're going to put that aside and we're going to charge them for everything else that we would recoup under an A2 rate. And we identified it as lost opportunity. So that's kind of the real basic look at how we came up with that rate.
I look at this kind of like I do the water transfer.
Pardon me?
I look at this kind of like the water transfer, and when we allowed Nevada, Arizona, and MWD to put a reservoir right outside in our territory to accommodate them, and we lose the power generated off it. So I'm just looking at it. It just doesn't add up to me why someone would be willing to pay 21 cents for the total cost when they could have came to us for 11 cents. I think you got to look a little deeper and see what's.
Well, I think you have to look at the number of megawatts over 8 hours. It works out to $26.40 versus $120. So they're 20 times more that they'd pay in Wheeling than they're paying us for the backfeed.
Just to give you an idea, we just took some readings out at Pattern yesterday or today, and I was just looking at them this afternoon. They're very basic, very rough numbers, assuming that the meter was set at 0 when they'd at, and I think they've been in operation now for a couple months.
Yeah.
Couple months, and roughly about $67,000 is what going to be our billing for those 2 months off of the backfeed issue. Now we're still struggling with them on the station power. They're a very tough group to work with. We're not comfortable with this at all. We had some very, very lively discussions, even with internally, on how to try to deal with this.
But they only have 30 days left to get the station power fixed, or get us satisfied and get this contract so we can get it in front of the board. Or, again, their temporary agreement runs out, and then they have a problem.
So what we're saying then, they're non-customers, non-load customers.
Say that again.
They're non-load customers. They're not our customers.
Put your mic on.
Oh, I'm sorry. They're non-IID customers, loads paying customers of IID.
They're non-load?
They
will be.
They will be once we hook up to station power, but to confuse Director Desert even more. But on this part about backfeed is they're a IID customer receiving distribution service, not from IID.
They're paying the idea for the right to do this.
They're paying the IID.
IID's not generating the energy, wheeling the energy, scheduling the energy.
They're compensating the IID ratepayers.
They're honoring the balancing authority that they're in.
Because of the fact that they're inside our service territory. That there's one of the very distinct differences between our service territory and a balancing authority. In the service territory, you have a complete monopoly. You cannot come and serve in our service territory without our permission. In the balancing authority, as we have seen, somebody can come in and do it.
You still have open access.
So basically, what we are trying to attempt is to have our customers, our IID, be compensated for the fact that we lost opportunity to not only serve in power, because when we serve in power, the costs are socialized through everybody. So there is money to be made and kind of that. So we're trying to recoup that money. It's not a typical arrangement, to say the least. But
because it's not typical to have somebody self-generating energy in your own. Balancing authority or service territory.
we do have agreements, believe it or not. We have agreements with San Diego, SRP, SAE, where we may serve them, and then we actually bill them for services like that, because that's more common at the fringes of your up and going up the grade. We actually service some customers that are actually San Diego Gas and Electric customers, but we have an agreement between the two utilities to do that, because it just makes more sense for us to do it.
Cheaper for us to get a line there versus
Yeah, because
them.
we're already there. That's more typical than what you have here, is where you have a customer that's
In your backyard.
in your backyard coming off 500 that's not yours, and this is an option. It's a solution, not the most comfortable one, I think.
Mario, on the parasitic load, the energy that they use, does it go through a meter,
Yes,
through their own meter?
it goes through both. In the diagram that Carl had,
No, I'm talking about parasitic load. I'm not talking about backfeed.
no, both. We have
Parasitic is backfeed, it's just which way you're going.
Do they get credit? Do they get renewable credit?
not an energy that's coming in, because we're only measuring, if you're talking about
I know,
what-
but their parasitic load, does anyone get renewable credit for it?
I don't think so, Director Hanks, because they're using up that energy, just like the geothermals is probably the most common example. They don't use as much energy as the geothermals do to operate. So because they use a certain percentage of it that doesn't, when they export, they don't export that small bit, they don't get credit for it. No, I would say no.
Mario and Carl, the IV sub is out there. And for those that don't know it, the IID is servicing distribution power to the IV sub, and they have been doing it for some 30 years.
Yes.
That's distribution power covers their parasitic loss, their service load, their everything. Station service, everything. At what rate are we charging San Diego at the IV sub for this?
Large commercial.
Is that A2?
Very close to the A2. It's a little bit different. The demand charge, I believe, is the biggest difference. Yeah, it's 275 is the difference, but they're very close. But one's called a large commercial.
I find it very disturbing that we help all these people, but we have a plant in Brawley that hires 1,200 people, and we can't seem to help them.
Beef plant?
Yeah.
Okay, so any other comments from the board or from the audience? Peter, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think this is a learning process for everybody. Treating ourselves.
So what's the next step from this? This will be our second rate hearing in regards to this, so this will come to the board for action?
Well, my plan would be when the contract is ready for approval, it will be brought to the board for action. So I don't think we need any action before then.
How does it qualify as a rate, to qualify for a rate hearing? It sounds to me like they're paying you a fee for service or something.
It's a contract. We started off thinking that we might have a rate or a tariff, but as we went along, further discussion with Finance and Energy, we thought it made more sense not to do that and to have it as a contract, as a rate, as part of the contract that the board would vote on on each individual contract.
Are we going to have any issues of precedent setting with, say, in La Quinta or anywhere else?
I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think this isn't transmission service per se that we would be looking at. This is more distribution related, and I don't think that's going to set a precedent.
There's nothing in this that violates our contract with Coachella Valley or anyone?
Not that I know of, but if it's the board wishes, I'll run it through our FERC attorney just to make sure. but I don't see it myself. I'll check with Debbie and have her vet it out just to make sure it doesn't set a precedent. But I don't think that it does.
I just want to make sure we're not violating any of our
No,
contract.
I'll run it through Debbie tomorrow just to be sure, but just to get a final decision from her whether she thinks it sets a precedent or not.
I think that's everything. Any other comments, questions, discussion? Thank you, audience, and thank you, staff, board, for participating today. Good night.